Welcome everyone to Polar Bear International's Tundra Connections program. My name is Lance Rougeux with Discovery Education, and we are live here on the shores of the Hudson Bay. Thank you so much for joining us. Pretty early in the morning for most of you that we saw on. We saw Connecticut and Pennsylvania and all sorts of classrooms. So thank you so much for joining us. We are here today to talk about polar bears and penguins, two of my favorite topics and two of our scientists' favorite topics, right? So our audience today is really, it's elementary school. If you're a middle school class, though, stay on with us. Just ask the questions that you want to ask, because we're going to take those questions throughout the broadcast. For the teachers, we'll take about approximately 30 minutes. We might stay over a little bit, depends on the number of questions that we get in. But we're going to have a lot of fun this morning. This is a conversation bringing your class live to the tundra, and we have some experts here who have a lot to share with you. So you can submit your questions in a couple different ways. You can submit them in the chat window, you can send them to us at questions@pbears.org, or you can tweet them to us at #TundraConnection. So lots of ways to submit those questions. So start putting them in the chat window, or email them, or tweet them to us now. So why don't we get started? Like I said, we're on the shores of the Hudson Bay. We have three wonderful panelists with us today. Why don't you guys introduce yourself? We'll start with Nick.
Hi everybody, my name is Nick Pilfold. I'm a polar bear scientist. I currently reside in Edmonton, Canada, and most of my research focuses on polar bears and seals in the Arctic.
Excellent. How about Megan?
Hi, my name is Dr. Megan Owen, and I'm from the San Diego Zoo's Institute for Conservation Research, and I feel really lucky because I get to study bears of all kinds, but my favorite bear species to study is the polar bear, and it's a real pleasure to be here on the Hudson Bay.
All right, Kyle?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kyle Armour. I'm a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I study climate science, and in particular I study the role of sea ice in the climate system.
All right, so to kick this off, I thought it would be fun. The main question I think the kids want to know are polar bears and penguins friends? And it might seem like a really, fun question, and it is, but, there's a lot that goes into answering that, actually. It starts with where they live, the different poles. So maybe to investigate that, we'll start with, and we talk about the poles, let's talk about sea ice.
Yeah, so what is sea ice? Sea ice is frozen seawater. So in particular, it freezes on the surface of the ocean when it gets cold enough in the atmosphere. And so you cool until the point where you start to freeze the seawater, and then you start floating on top of the ocean. And sea ice is really dynamic. You can see these flows of sea ice here, and it's blown around by winds and ocean currents and tides. And here you see some waves. And so it's relatively thin. It grows to several meters, so it's about as thick as you are tall. It can grow to be about twice as tall as that, but it doesn't get too thick. And you can see here a boat going through it. You can see how thick it is as it breaks and kind of fractures that ice.
All right. Is it different than, a lot of the kids probably want to know, myself included, different than icebergs?
It is, yeah. So sea ice grows in the ocean, as I mentioned. Icebergs are actually things that grew on land. It was snow that fell on land and actually turned into quite thick ice on land, something as tall as a building, and then breaks off into the ocean and floats away. So here you can see sea ice with a person walking on it, and then icebergs, which are much, much taller.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you tell us the differences between the Arctic and Antarctic in terms of sea ice? How are the two poles different?
Right, yeah, it's a good question. So they may seem similar. They both have sea ice. In the Arctic, the sea ice, one difference is it forms in the wintertime in the Arctic when it gets cold enough, so it forms in October through January to March. Around Antarctica, you have sea ice also. That tends to form in the southern hemisphere winter, which is the same as the northern hemisphere summer. So that tends to form in April through June, July. That's one difference. Another difference between them is that in the Arctic, the sea ice forms within a basin. It's the Arctic Ocean that's kind of surrounded by land, whereas in the Southern Ocean, it's really growing out around the continent. And so here you can see a video showing the seasonal cycle of ice growing in the winter and shrinking in the summer. And this is just showing the Arctic sea ice here, growing into Hudson Bay where we are, and throughout the Arctic, around Greenland. Around Antarctica, what you'd see is ice growing all the way around the continent out and shrinking back again. And that continent is full of ice on top of it on the land, and that's where the icebergs come from.
Okay, fantastic. And I don't know, BJ, for the kids that are watching, we're going to try and jump out here. It is a really snowy day here, and the wind is howling, so hence our big parkas here, but you can see a live shot, so you're going to help us look for bears. Hopefully we'll see a polar bear at some point come meandering through, but right now you can get a sense of where we're at and that sense of place. but we're tucked nice and warm in our tundra buggy that you saw in the opening video. So why don't let's talk about who are friends with polar bears and penguins. And I mean, I think it's hard to imagine that you wouldn't want to be a friend with a penguin. So why don't we start there? Megan, can you tell us? Actually, let's put a picture up. Let's put a picture of this particular animal, and I want the kids there and the teachers take 10 seconds, and I want you to collect answers. Where do you think? Which pole, or both, or neither? Where does this animal live? North Pole, South Pole, both? All right, take a couple seconds there. Ask your students. Put your answers in the chat window. We'd love to see you put them in the chat window. And why don't we dive into it then? So, Megan, tell us a little bit about this wonderful animal.
Sure. So I think many of you probably know these are penguins, and these are emperor penguins. And I think emperor penguins are probably the most iconic of all Antarctic species. And they're, it's hard not to love an emperor penguin. But they're really a part of a very, very rich Antarctic ecosystem. And many, many bird species and marine mammals live in that southern ocean system, and all of them are dependent upon the health of that ecosystem to survive. And these guys are incredibly lucky because they can go on land or on top of the sea ice in the Antarctic and be safe from any predators, because there's no predators on land or on the sea ice in Antarctica. In the water, though, we have a very different story. So this is a leopard seal, and I think some of you may have seen movies about penguins where the leopard seal is the big villain. And that's because leopard seals love to eat penguins. So penguins, when they're in the water, things are pretty challenging for them. And so when a penguin needs to go in the water to get their food, and of course, getting food in that very, very cold environment is incredibly important. But as soon as they get their food, they're going to haul back to the sea ice and jump out and get out as fast as they can. And once they're up there, they can relax and they can go about their daily lives. And so here's another example. This is a Weddell seal. And so this Weddell seal gets out of the water, and it can just relax and just conserve its energy, get its sleep, and not worry about predators that may want to eat them. The story is very, very different in the Arctic. And so this is a picture of a ringed seal. And so that lounging about on top of the ice is something you probably wouldn't see a ringed seal do very often. This animal is stressed because he's looking out for predators that might be coming its way.
Fantastic. So before we jump into this animal, we did have a question that just came in, and it's going back actually, kind of tying into the two poles. A third grade class wants to know why the sea ice doesn't grow even thicker than it does.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the basic idea of why it doesn't keep growing is that sea ice is a really good insulator. When it gets to be several meters thick, maybe as tall as you are, it actually protects the ocean from the atmosphere. And so you stop growing the sea ice eventually when it gets so thick that you can't actually freeze that seawater on the bottom of that sea ice anymore.
Okay, excellent. And then in terms of our friendship theme today, Megan, so polar bears and penguins, jury's out. We're still investigating that. But in terms of the penguin being a friend with a leopard seal, the answer is pretty conclusively a no.
Yeah, I think the penguin doesn't really call the leopard seal a friend.
Not a friend.
And I think the leopard seal calls the penguin food.
Okay, perfect. Let's put another picture up now. So we talked about the penguins. Let's put a picture up of our favorite friend up here.
Right.
All right. So same type of question. Take a couple seconds. Where does this animal live? North Pole, South Pole, both? And why? That's what we're going to investigate. So let's turn it over to Dr. Nick and kind of dive into that a little bit. Our friend the polar bear, and I'll look out the windows here for some.
Absolutely. So our friend the polar bear lives in the north. He's the apex predator up here, and he exists on the sea ice. And that's why that picture of that ring seal looks so stressed, because ring seals got to keep looking around for a bear. Any moment might come along pounce on them and have a really decent snack. So living on either pole is a real challenge, and polar bears are particularly adapted to living in the north, which is a very variable of a climate for them to live in. They have lots of really cool adaptations to living on the sea ice. One of the things you might think about being on ice is it's really slippery. If anybody's ever been on the ice and the sidewalk freezes around home or something, you might slip. So polar bears have that same issue, but they develop ways around that. In particular, we got an example here of a polar bear paw print. So big paws, really wide, and very sharp tactile claws that can tack into that sea ice and be able to grip onto a very slippery surface. The claws are also really important because not only is the surface of the sea ice slippery, but so is their prey. Their prey is a big, round, fat object. It's basically a big lard tube that is not really that easy to get a hold on. So they have these really sharp claws that allow them to tack into that prey and hold on to it. So, if my buddy Kyle here is a seal and I'm a polar bear and I got this claw, I can actually tack in, hold on to him, and get in there for a little bit of a bite and have a meal. So that's one of the adaptations that polar bears have for living in this environment.
Okay, and we actually just had a question come in too about this on the end, the fur.
Oh, the fur,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So why don't we just dive into that?
Yeah,
Thank you
sure.
for the question. It came in a couple
thank you very
times.
much. Okay, so we have an example of polar bear fur here. Polar bears are they're big animals. They're really fat, but one of the things that's different about them relative to marine mammals is they don't use that fat for warmth. So marine mammals have a layer of blubber, and that allows them to stay warm. But polar bears really count on this fur to stay warm. That's their primary mechanism by which they are able to keep warm in such a cold environment. So yeah, very, very cool stuff. It also is absent of any color at all. So there's no pigment in polar bear fur, so they really take up the surrounding environment. So if you see a polar bear in the middle of the day, it looks white as anything, but when the sun starts to set, the bears actually kind of take on like an orangey sort of look because they're really picking up that light that's coming in. So it's a really interesting adaptation to being up here.
Excellent. A question came in, and thank you. This is the first graders in Newark, New Jersey, want to know, because we just talked about the two poles, the penguins and polar bears. How are they, in kind of some differences, but how are they the same? Are there any things that they share in common?
Penguins and polar bears, there actually are a number of things they share in common, if you can believe that, because the environment, there's a lot of similarities. So getting food and being able to store the fat from that food is something that both penguins and polar bears really need to do. So that kind of need to store energy on their bodies is one of the things that they have in common. Another thing they have in common is their feet that Dr. Nick just showed you for polar bears. Penguins also have feet that have been specialized for gripping the ice, and so they can get where they need to go without slipping. And they have to stand for long periods of time, and those specialized penguin feet really help them do well on the ice.
I would say the other thing, if I could add in, is that they're both really fat. Being fat is a really good thing when you're living in the poles because food comes around in only short, intense bursts. So what you want to be able to do as an animal is eat as much as possible, pack that on so that you can use it later on when you need to rely on something when there's not food around. So both polar bears and penguins use their fat stores when they're fasting through these periods where food's not available. And actually, even knowing penguins are quite a bit smaller than polar bears, they use their fat stores at the same rate. So that's really interesting, is they got two animals in two different places in the world, and their adaptations are pretty much identical.
Okay, and that's, no, go ahead.
Well, the other thing is too that they go through those long periods without eating when they're trying to have young. So penguins will go through long periods of time fasting when they're sitting on an egg and they need to keep that egg safe and warm. They can't go out and get food. A polar bear mom, while she's in the den, she's staying in that den, she's taking care of her young, and she's not going out to get food during that entire time.
Okay, and so this question, it ties right into what we're talking about. Michigan students, looks like Patton 86 or Miss Lakowski. Well, this question came from one of the two. How do polar bears protect themselves during high winds and storms? I mean, we went out earlier you could see it here today.
Yeah, absolutely. In the middle of winter, it can get very cold in the Arctic, get down to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not easy on a polar bear. So usually what they do is they hunker down. they'll find a piece of sea ice to get behind, where the wind will cast right over top of them, and they'll tuck right in there and stay as warm as they can and not really move. That's the best thing to do in a storm.
Okay, excellent. All right, so why don't we transition in? We've talked polar bears and penguins and the two different poles and kind of some of the differences. But what are some of the, like the question came in about penguins and polar bears specifically, what about the similarities between the poles? And why don't we start with Nick and then we'll go to Kyle.
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned before, the two poles, they're very extreme climates. So it can get very cold in both Antarctica and the Arctic, and it's a very variable climate. You know, for some people that live closer to the equator, you go out every day and it more or less looks the same. You know, it might be sunny, it might be 20 degrees out, but in the polar regions, the day-to-day changes are really extreme. So you can get a lot of variability in the environment for sure. So that's definitely a similarity.
Okay, all right. How about you, Nick? Or Kyle, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so both poles have sea ice, as we mentioned.
Right.
Sea ice growing in the Arctic Basin, sea ice growing around Antarctica, and in both cases, sea ice grows when it gets cold enough. And so one way that they're related is that right now we have global warming happening that's really influencing sea ice at both poles, limiting the timing at which they can grow and how thick it can grow, those kinds of things. And the basic way that's happening is we have global warming because of greenhouse gas emissions. That's basically pollution coming from cars and power plants. And greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, basically, you can think of them as working like a blanket. You add more greenhouse gases, you insulate more, you trap more heat. And you can also think of it as just adding a second jacket. So if I was to give my jacket to Nick here, he's comfortable.
I am very comfortable right now.
So I was to take my jacket off.
And these jackets are pretty warm.
These are
Yeah,
super
very
warm.
warm jacket.
I'll get cold, but I'm going to give you more greenhouse gases.
What?
We'll just throw this on you for the rest of the time.
All right.
So he's gonna overheat now because I've given him this greenhouse gas layer, and that's basically
It is
what's
getting
happening
pretty
with
warm
sea
in
ice. Yeah. So if he was sea ice, he'd be melting right now.
Well, keep asking questions, kids. The more questions you ask, the hotter Dr. Nick gets. So why don't we, when we talk about some of the similarities, there are some animals that aren't necessarily the same, but they look the same, right? So why don't we dive in? Megan, there's something that looks like close to the penguin up here in the north, right?
Yeah, up here in the north there is a bird called an auk, and an auk has been historically referred to as the penguin of the north. And auks have some similarities to penguins in that they rely on the ocean to get their food. One of the biggest differences in terms of auks that currently live is that auks can fly, and of course penguins are completely flightless. But historically, there was a species of auk, the great auk, that was also flightless. And in terms of size, that auk was also comparable to an emperor penguin. So a very large flightless bird that nested in colonies. And one of the reasons why the auk went extinct was that it was confronted with a very large terrestrial predator, and that was humans, which drove the auk to extinctions. So these large flightless birds that do nest on land, they don't do well when there's a predator on land with them.
Okay. Do any animals visit both poles, like the north and south?
Yeah, the Arctic tern is one of the animals that does. This is a migratory bird that nests in the Arctic and is there for the Arctic summer. But then when it gets too cold, it flies all the way to Antarctica. It's actually the longest migration route of any animal in the animal kingdom. And it flies something like 20,000 kilometers a year or 12,000 miles a year.
Okay. Any others?
Yeah, so in Antarctica and the Arctic, we have killer whales, or orcas. And so in both these systems, in this case, you don't have whales migrating from one system to the other. In fact, there are two different populations living in both systems. And as you can see in the picture there, orcas have a big dorsal fin, it stands up very straight, and they can't swim in systems that are covered really with a lot of sea ice because of that dorsal fin. They have to come to the surface and the dorsal fin gets in the way. But as soon as that sea ice melts back a little bit, then these killer whales move right to the sort of the edge of that sea ice, and they'll hunt the seals that are now into the water. One of the things that we're seeing in the Arctic is we're seeing a lot more killer whales as sea ice shrinks due to global warming and climate change, and so they're coming in and starting to replace polar bears during the summer as the apex predator in the system.
Okay, excellent. We have time for a couple minutes of questions, so I'm just going to jump out to our doc here. Please, submit your questions in the chat window now. You can send them to us via email or the hashtag #TundraConnections, but send those questions into the chat window now. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Are leopard seals the only seal that eats other seals? Anybody know the
Well,
answer to that one?
Actually, leopard seals don't eat other seals.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so their main prey is penguins, but they'll also eat krill. So that they don't really eat other seals in the water. So, you know, a Weddell seal, the thing in Antarctica they really have to worry about are killer whales. Killer whales are the things that are going to be the biggest predator for them. But yeah, leopard seals, they're just kind of like the mean bully. I don't think they really hang out together, you know, but certainly they don't eat Weddell seals or other seals. Yeah.
Okay, good question, and thank you for clarifying. How about, do polar bears have any, this is a good one, do polar bears have any predators?
Well, polar bears do have a predator, and that's humans. But beyond that, they are certainly the apex predator in a healthy Arctic ecosystem. So polar bears, you know, when you watch a polar bear walking along the landscape here, they don't look like they have a care in the world. So in that kind of relaxed way of going about the landscape is a sort of a demonstration that you're not looking for predators. Any species that are prey species, they don't walk without stopping and looking around. So that vigilance is a part of surviving as a prey species.
Excellent, excellent. Let's see if we have another question. There are questions I think that we got to. How strong, oh, how about this? So smiles, so thank you, smiles. How long can polar bears and penguins, can they stay underwater? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Oh.
That's a great
That's
question.
a great question. I'll take the polar bear one.
Okay.
Right? So we just recently had a polar bear that was videotaping underwater for more than 4 minutes. So that's definitely a record for polar bears. They use the water as a hunting tool. So actually we have a really cool video footage that we can show here where a polar bear is hunting a bearded seal on a piece of ice and has used the water to sneak up on the blind side of the seal, and there he goes, and he almost catches that seal.
Wow.
And didn't even see the bear coming at all. So in that case, you know, the bear has used the water for cover to sneak up on the seal, and in a lot of cases they've held their breath for a few minutes to get close so the seal doesn't even notice they're there, and then bang, they ambush the seal right at the edge.
Wow.
I
that's
think the
impressive.
one thing to add though is that if you notice in that clip, the polar bear didn't get the seal. That seal got in the water fast enough and the polar bear had to follow it into the water. And so once in the water, the polar bear is much less effective as a hunter.
Okay, all right. How about penguins? Do we have any sense?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that I don't think any of us have an answer for. There are 17 species of penguin, and all the penguins are marine species. So presumably they're very adept in the water and they can hold their breath for quite some time, but I don't have a number to pin on how long an emperor penguin can stay underwater.
All right, so that's a good research question
Absolutely.
for all
Yeah.
of you. And when you join us later today for our next webcast, you can share it and let us know. So do your research and give us the answer a little bit later today. We just have a minute or two, so we're going to kind of wrap up this webcast, and I'll take a look real quick for maybe one or two more questions. But ultimately, we're here to talk about the different poles and the relationship, penguins and polar bears, and are they really friends? So, what do you all think, and Kyle, what do you think?
I would guess the polar bears and penguins would not be good friends, simply because no one's friends with the polar bear.
No one's friends with a polar bear. Well, that is true, right? So, thank you guys for joining us today. I mean, it's an amazing experience out here. We're going to be broadcasting later today, tomorrow, throughout the whole week. So we hope that you'll join us. The next webcast for today is at 12 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, and it's really taking all of your questions. So I know we had a lot of questions come in that we got to, but some that we're not able to. So please join us later today and ask all of those questions, because ultimately we're up here to help you and connect you with scientists and talk about polar bears, and today polar bears and penguins. But even more so, this very important message of why we're up here. So Kyle, maybe if you can talk just a little bit about taking action.
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things that is really important is that polar bears really depend on sea ice for their habitat. To hunt these seals, as we saw, they need that sea ice platform. And as I mentioned, sea ice is being melted by greenhouse gases and global warming. So one of the things we can do is try to limit greenhouse gases, and so that those are things coming out of exhaust from cars and power plants. And so one of the things you can do is walk and bike more than driving, and you can also turn off lights when you leave rooms. Things like that help conserve energy and prevent greenhouse gas pollution.
Excellent. And we want all of you to know, too, I mean, Polar Bears International's goal is to to always keep polar bears in the Arctic. Always, and you heard that from Elisa as we led into the webcast today. And there's time that remains, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
still time,
absolutely.
and ultimately, it's the impact that you can make. So, thank you already for all the things that you're doing to reduce your carbon footprint. For those of you that bike to school today, perhaps, right? And don't forget to tell us about all the actions that you're taking. We have this great project. I mean, there's a huge impact when everybody does their part and it all ties together and adds up, right? It's like putting jackets on Dr. Nick, right? The more you put on, the hotter he gets. The more little things that everybody does, this huge impact that it has. So we want to ask you to consider joining Project Polar Bear. And I think we might have a slide that we can jump out to. If not, we'll make sure that we share it on the site a little bit later about Project Polar Bear. And you can see all of the teams and the projects that they're working on to make a difference. So please visit our Tundra Connections page, visit Polar Bears International. We are giving away a free polar bear adoption. For anybody that takes the time to finish our post-broadcast survey, we're going to raffle off a free polar bear adoption. That polar bear will not come to your house, but you will adopt it and be able to track it up here and see it. So also, if you check out our iTunes U channel, this is something relatively new, pretty fantastic. So itunes.com/Polar Bears International. Tons of teacher and student resources to go along with our broadcast. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors, to our expert panelists. What a great way to kick off today. We hope that you'll join us in a few hours. The bears maybe will start to wake up and meander by the buggy, and we'll get to see some of those bears live. So join us later today for questions around the world, and thank you again from the Tundra. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.